There's no reason in the world that we couldn't adapt to allowing competing currency within our own country. And then if people just love Federal Reserve notes and wants to spend Federal Reserve notes and save in Federal Reserve notes, let them do it. But others who might think that another system is better, I think we ought to talk about legalizing it. To me, I like to summarize and saying, why don't we legalize the Constitution? And the Constitution has been rather clear. It might not have given us the perfect monetary system, and we didn't follow it very well, but at least it did indicate that the founders didn't like paper money. They did not like emitting bills of credit. They did not like fiat money. And if we were to look just to the Constitution, it would mean that we should reconsider commodity money, something that governments can't control, can't monopolize, and let the market work. So those are basically my thoughts on this issue. So I'm anxious to hear the remarks from Dr. Parks and Dr. White on these issues, because they've studied this for many, many years. And there's still a lot of questions to answer. We do have a bill, H.R. 1098, which is far from a perfect bill, but it's a place to get started in talking about what we might do and how we can do it, because things could change rapidly. Although many of us have been thinking about this for many, many years, things could move rapidly. Currency destructions, the end of currency, sometimes move much quicker than everybody dreams that it could. So a major crisis could come. It could come next month or next year or in a few years. But to me, there's no guarantee that we have 5 or 10 years to keep studying this. I think that we need to get people engaged in this and talking about and understanding the monetary issue. So I am very grateful to our two guests coming today and being willing to submit their remarks and answer some questions for us. So I will go to our first witness, Dr. Lawrence Parks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Paul, for inviting me. I very much appreciate the opportunity to testify in support of H.R. 1098, the Free Competition in Currency Act of 2011. I'm honored to have been invited. Now, I know it must sound like hyperbole, but I believe that H.R. 1098 is perhaps the most important piece of legislation ever to come before the Congress, because H.R. 1098 is necessary to make a transition from a certain catastrophic collapse of our unauthorized by the Constitution, dishonest, and unstable legal tender irredeemable paper ticket electronic monetary system. Well, I suspect that this committee will be most interested in how this bill will affect jobs, debt, economic growth, and capital markets, pensions, and a host of other important and timely topics. I'm going to focus my opening statement with an example of the dishonesty, which is the Achilles heel of this system, of the present system, by highlighting one of the many misrepresentations about our money. There are 3 takeaway points from my testimony. The first is that this system is not in conformity with the Constitution. The second, and very importantly, it is dishonest. And thirdly, it is unstable and in the process of blowing up, perhaps while I'm testifying here today. One can be certain of a complete collapse of this monetary system because there is no longer any market-based self-correcting mechanism for increasing debt, increasing the money supply, and increasing leverage. And any system, any physical system, any social system, any system without a self-correcting mechanism blows up. And with no exceptions, the history of legal tender irredeemable paper ticket money is that its purchasing power always approaches its cost of production, which is 0. Now I want to explain why the system is dishonest. There are myriad misrepresentations and non-disclosure of material information about what we call a dollar. No amount of regulation or oversight committees will cure dishonesty. The only remedy is honesty. To illustrate what in my view is the most egregious example of this dishonesty, I give an example of silver, although the same principle applies with gold. Now it was and remains inconvenient for people to carry around silver dollars because they're heavy and bulky. And so what people did, let's have that first exhibit up there. Okay. What people did is that they deposited their silver dollars, typically in a bank, and received in exchange a promissory note, aka a bank note or a note, that bore the inscription that so many dollars have been deposited, and the note is payable to the bearer on demand. So here's an example of a United States note, And notice that this is not a dollar. At the top of the bill are the words United States note, and I don't know if you can see it from where you're sitting, but under the image it says, we'll pay to the bearer on demand $1. Well, what is a dollar? Next slide, please. That's a dollar as put into law by Alexander Hamilton in the Coinage Act of 1792. But then the promise to pay a dollar, let's have the next slide. The promise to pay a dollar was defaulted, and here's the punchline. The broken promissory note, the dishonored promissory note, is now represented as being a dollar. This is a gross misrepresentation and is dishonest. This piece of paper is not even a valid note. The signatures of the Treasury of the United States and the Secretary of the Treasury are gratuitous and deceptive. In other words, what we use for money is just dishonest promissory notes and have been misrepresented to be dollars. It means that all of the securities in our capital markets at home and abroad are denominated in dishonored promissory notes. This has immense implication for trade, jobs, pensions, military preparedness, and almost everything else that's important. Now, people have the notion that the Congress can make the dollar anything the Congress wants it to be and back it with specie or not or whatever. This is demonstrably false. The highest law in our country is the Constitution, and all of our laws have to be in conformity with it. The word dollar is mentioned twice in the Constitution, but it is not defined in the Constitution. It's mentioned in connection with the slave tax, which is no more, but it's also mentioned, and very importantly, in the 7th Amendment, which guarantees everyone a right to a trial by jury for any dispute, $20 or more. Now, if it were true that the Congress could redefine the dollar, that would mean that the Congress could redefine the 7th Amendment, which is ridiculous. And so the question comes up, what is the objective meaning of the dollar? And in fact, for the 7th Amendment to have objective meaning, the dollar has to have an objective meaning. And what they're talking about in the Constitution, let's have the next slide, is the Spanish mill dollar, sometimes called a piece of 8. The Spanish had built mints all over the colonies, and the Spanish mill dollar was ubiquitous. And when independence was declared, the colonies adopted the Articles of Confederation, which gave the Congress the power to issue money called continentals. Here's an example of a continental $30 bill. Next slide, please. Notice it entitles, I don't know if you can read it from where you're sitting. Notice it entitles the bearer to receive 30 Spanish mill dollars or the value thereof in gold and silver. The value of a coin is its specie content. After independence was achieved and the Constitution was adopted, the United States did not want to rely on Spanish mints for its coins. The U.S. wanted its own mints to mint its own coins, including dollars. To that end, Alexander Hamilton, then Secretary of the Treasury, wrote the Coinage Act of 1792, wherein he tells us exactly what a dollar is. And what a dollar is 371.25 grains of silver. Where did Hamilton get that crazy number? Well, that was the silver content of the Spanish mill dollar. So they couldn't just introduce some arbitrary coin because everybody had contracts in terms of dollars. So the Constitution requires that the dollar be a weight of silver. Now, some might claim that if Hamilton defined the dollar this way, perhaps it can be defined another way. And that is not true either. Hamilton's definition of a dollar was not arbitrary. All he did was write into law what was already a fact. Now, here's another way of looking at this issue. Go to the next slide, please. Suppose we have a sign that says cat. Next slide. And we hang it on a dog. Next slide. Does the dog become a cat? And suppose the Congress passes a law that says all the dogs with cat signs are now cats. Go to the next slide. Now are all these dogs cats? And the answer is no. And conceptually, this is no different than taking a piece of paper, printing the word dollar on it, adding seals and signatures, and calling it a dollar. And this is precisely what has happened to our money. Clearly, there is no easy remedy. How could such an immense fraud be perpetrated? Well, there's several reasons, but one of the most important, which H.R. 1098 will go a long way to correcting, is that we're coerced to using fraudulent money by the legal tender statutes. By getting rid of legal tender, H.R. 1098 is necessary and may be sufficient to help pave the way to an honest monetary system. I'm going to stop now and give you a chance to address any questions or issues that may come to mind. Thank you so much.
And we will remain a danger to the Federal Reserve System as well. Yes. And the Fed, right, and the Fed. Yeah!